Sea Wolves is a 1980 film directed by Andrew McLaglen and starring Gregory Peck, Roger Moore, and David Niven, among plenty of other aging British actors. Andrew McLaglen is a director that I have a huge appreciation for. If anyone has watched my review of his film Chisholm, then you've likely heard me mention him before. It's my longest review of a movie that I've done, and that's because I've been in love with that movie since I was a small child. If you haven't seen it, I hope you'll consider checking it out, but in the meantime, let me just say that I think he is a severely underappreciated director, and not nearly as well remembered as he should be. Not only did he work with John Wayne several times in some of his most enjoyable late-career movies, but he worked with Jimmy Stewart, Dean Martin, many other Western genre legends. He directed The Shadow Riders, one of the far too rare times that brought Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott together for a Western. He directed 96 episodes of a little series called Gunsmoke, and he directed 116 episodes of Have Gun Will Travel, my personal favorite Western TV series. He was a master of economic, action-filled storytelling. He obviously was easy to work with as he continued to bring back the same actors for multiple films, and on a side note, his father was Victor McLaglen, one of the most memorable members of the John Ford Stock Company. He's a legend to me in terms of the Western genre, and was behind the camera for a great many movies that I hold dear. But today, I'm not here to talk about a Western. I'm here to review The Sea Wolves, a war film that came at the end of a trio of movies he made starring Roger Moore. Roger Moore, at this stage of his career, was rather busy playing a dapper secret agent of some kind, but managed to carve out some time between globe-trotting missions to go crank out a few movies with Andrew McLaglen. The first was The Wild Geese, which was released between The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. After bouncing around in space, facing off with Richard Kiel, Roger Moore grew out a beard and made North Sea Hijack, also known as Folks, with 2 Fs. Once the fervor around Moonraker died down and Roger Moore felt comfortable going out in public looking like himself, he shaved the beard and joined the ensemble cast of The Sea Wolves. Just a note, I have not seen The Wild Geese or North Sea Hijack yet, but I'm hoping to remedy that. And also, I don't really think Moonraker is that bad, it's just fun to make light of. But For Your Eyes Only was the course correction that his Bond needed. I think it's great. But anyway, The Sea Wolves tells the story of an off-the-books mission that the British government wants taken care of. That mission involves tracking down a radio transmitter which is on a ship sitting in the harbor of neutral Goa. The radio by itself would be harmless, but the Nazis were using it to send out ship coordinates to a roaming U-boat which was busy sinking every ship it could find. Since it's neutral territory, a standard military option will not do. So, they turn to a group of retired, elderly men who used to make up the Calcutta Light Horse, who haven't seen action since the previous century. These men are more than eager to take on the mission, regardless that they will get no recognition, no pay, and will definitely be disavowed should they be caught or killed. I've watched far too many episodes of Mission Impossible. It's a pretty incredible story, and what makes it even more so is that it's based in fact. The true story isn't quite as dramatic. The German body count was significantly lower, and the pyrotechnic display to cap off the mission didn't play out quite as depicted, but it's a movie. What would people have to complain about if they told it exactly as it happened? I'm pretty certain I watched this movie as a kid, but I remember nothing about it. What I do remember is this movie poster. That image has been stuck in my head for most of my life, and all the caricatured faces and gun-waving senior citizens that decorate the lower half had made me remember this as a very action-packed movie. And it's not. There are a couple brief spurts of action prior to the mission, and the mission itself is quite well staged, but other than that, it plays more so as a geriatric Dirty Dozen, at least for the last half. The first half, and I don't want to say this because I hardly ever do, but it's pretty slow. So many people throw the term boring around when it comes to movies, and this movie is never boring, but it takes a good long while to get going. That first hour largely focuses on the characters played by Gregory Peck and Roger Moore, both active-duty military officers who plan out the mission and go back and forth to Goa a couple of times to obtain as much information as they can. This was a very interesting, I almost want to say strange role for Gregory Peck. This is news to no one. But Gregory Peck is a phenomenal actor. He starred in so many classic films, and in the lead-up to this point in his career, he was doing mainly westerns and war films. Not really the prestige pictures that he made his name in. And The Sea Wolves is not a prestige picture either. It's a kind of rough-and-tumble, scrappy movie, and seeing Gregory Peck as a quippy spy is something to behold. He's playing British, so he's doing an accent the whole time, and he keeps it up quite well, but he almost felt a little stiff to me. He's threatening to kill enemy agents pretty regularly and making snappy little remarks to Roger Moore, and it took me some time to adjust. Gregory Peck's voice. How can I describe it? If you needed to pick one audio clip to demonstrate the term dignified, you could play Gregory Peck saying anything, and you'd get the idea. His voice was engineered to deliver moving, heartfelt monologues in movies like Gentleman's Agreement and, of course, To Kill a Mockingbird. And here he is, in his mid-60s, with a large, bushy mustache, telling a nervous enemy spy he'd be delighted to kill him, while arching his eyebrows alongside the king of arched eyebrows, Roger Moore. It's quite a sight, believe me, but he really grew on me in this part. One of those brief spurts of action early on involves his character taking on two men at night near the dock, and he acquits himself very well. There was probably a stunt double to handle the more bruising parts of it, but he was great, and his deadpan shock when they accidentally get a German spy killed in the backseat of their car is very funny. Roger Moore is pretty much playing James Bond. They even put him in a tuxedo at one point, in case audiences hadn't made the connection yet. He wears a white tux jacket and a black one right after that. The rest of the time he's saddled with varying shades of khaki, so they blew the budget for formal wear. Comparing he and Gregory Peck, their characters are very similar. They both are handy in a fight, they both throw in little comments to lighten up the mission, but Roger Moore does it much more effortlessly. He already had 4 Bond films under his belt, and 6 seasons of The Saint prior to that, so he knew what he needed to do, and he's very entertaining doing it. Roger Moore famously had that line about his acting style consisting of eyebrow up or eyebrow down or something like that, and while that's funny and kind of true, I think his self-deprecation doesn't really do justice to what he was able to do on screen. He was never a powerhouse dramatic actor, but that's what people like Gregory Peck are for. The man of action with a lighter touch is necessary too, and Roger Moore brought that to many projects in his long career. The unfortunate side effect of having Bond-era Moore is the seeming requirement to fit in a woman for him to show off what a ladies' man he is. This time, she's played by Barbara Kellerman, who's secretly a German spy, a fact that Moore isn't aware of until 10 minutes before he kills her in self-defense. Her whole subplot is almost shockingly disjointed from the rest of the movie, and I kept waiting for it to tie in somehow, other than her just carrying on this romance while also working for Der Fuhrer, but it never really does. If you're like me, just skip through the more risque love scenes. It tightens things up remarkably. David Niven is the leader of the retired Light Horse members, and he was the highlight of the movie for me, but also sorely underused. David Niven was excellent his entire career, from something like Bachelor Mother in 1939, right up to Death on the Nile alongside Peter Ustinov, and beyond, because this was 2 years after Death on the Nile. Also, he was often the best part of some pretty dreadful movies, like Casino Royale. Which reminds me, there are 2 James Bonds in this movie. He's got some comedic lines that he tosses off so easily, but then he ends up captaining the ship that is to be used for the mission, so he's off camera for far too long. Another espionage veteran, John Steed himself, also known as Patrick Macnee, is, like David Niven, very underused. His character's one defining characteristic is that he likes to stand on his head in the mornings, and other than that, he blends into the background with the rest of the cheery older gents. It almost made me want to ask the casting director, you know he was in The Avengers, right? The one with Emma Peel? Ring a bell, anyone? I'm sure Patrick Macnee knew his part was going to be this small when he signed on, and probably took the role so he could hang out with all these guys and make a war movie at a time when most of these guys probably weren't being offered many action roles, so I don't blame him. And 5 years later, he was back with Roger Moore for A View to a Kill, as Moore's Bond embarked on his final mission. Wolf Collar, I have to mention, who is playing a real-life German spy, Trompeta. It's a brief role, but he's recognizable as the Nazi officer who implodes at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was only a year after this movie. Trevor Howard also shows up as another retiree who isn't quite as steady on his feet anymore and gets to participate in the mission preparations up to a point. His character is the only one with a trace of a backstory, and that's as thin as one line about wanting to get back at Jerry for killing his son. It's something, and gives Trevor Howard a little more substance to motivate him into getting involved. The rest of the Light Horse members kind of run together, and that's a definite weakness of this script. The anonymous heroes of this mission, for the most part, stay that way. Far too anonymous. But the whole lot of them do improve the movie once they're recruited. There's something so fun and heartwarming about watching all of their hands shoot into the air when they ask for volunteers, and truly excited to have a purpose again, and not just whiling away their days at the club talking about the glory days. You see them in training, going for exhausting looking jogs, lifting weights, and trying to will themselves back into shape. And of course, it all leads up to the final mission. I won't spoil anything for those who haven't seen it, but it doesn't go quite as smoothly as they probably hoped. Whether that's accurate or not, it's a realistic feeling touch. These commandos are older, a little overweight, and not as fast as they used to be, and the younger German sailors that they take on exploit that. And even though they all act like they have nothing to lose, when the bullets start flying and their comrades are taking fire, you can see the gravity of what they're doing hit them, very suddenly. It builds suspense in a rather unexpected way after the easygoing movie we've been watching. Let me just say, there is something exhilarating about watching Gregory Peck start blazing away with an MP40 machine gun. He squints, his jaw tightens up. He's both scary and also seems surprised about what he's doing. You have to see it to believe it. And finally, there are more James Bond connections that extend beyond the film's cast. It was edited by John Glenn, who had edited several previous Bond films, but this marked his final movie in the editing seat. Starting with For Your Eyes Only, he directed the final 3 Moore Bonds and both of Timothy Dalton's. You can feel that Bond-style editing that first showed up in On Her Majesty's Secret Service during the fight sequence with Gregory Peck, and all throughout the final mission. He keeps it tight and also somewhat disorienting, emphasizing the chaos of battle. The title sequence was designed by Maurice Binder, who invented the style of James Bond opening credits that everyone knows. The one he did for the Seawolves is pretty toned down in comparison, but those black backgrounds and circles as the wartime footage plays can be traced back as far as something like Dr. No, if you want. And finally, as the end credits roll, who breaks into song but Matt Monro? It took me a few seconds until I recognized the voice from Russia with Love, but it was him. The song, entitled The Precious Moments, does not match the style of this movie whatsoever, but it was still kind of fun all the same. The Seawolves is another one of those movies that isn't a classic and has its fair share of flaws, but there's something quite enjoyable about watching it. Even if, as you're in the middle of it, you're questioning what the point of Barbara Kellerman's character is, or you realize you don't know a single character's name and you've been referring to them in your mind as the actor, you can still set those things aside and enjoy it. Everyone on screen clearly had a blast making it, despite the excessive sweating during the scenes in Goa, and when you can feel that while watching it, it's pretty easy to settle in and have a good time yourself. I'd recommend it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, I hope you'll check back to Hildebrand Productions for more. Thanks again, and adios for now.